Hi, welcome to Moments with Marilyn. I'm your host, Marilyn Boyer, the mom of 14 homeschool kids who love the Lord and love each other. I absolutely love young moms, and it's my passion to provide you with tips and tools to make your journey easier. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today we have a special podcast, a relative of Louis Zamperini. You may have heard of the movie Unbroken that came out, maybe a couple years ago. Well, this is a relative of Louis. His name is Mike Zamperini, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So before we get started, let me remind you, you can access our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. Be sure to sign up for podcasts and make sure you visit our website, which is characterconcepts.com. And there you'll find character curriculum from preschool through high school. So let's get right into it. Thanks for being with us today. Okay, today I want to introduce you to Mike Zamperini. He is a relative of Louis Zamperini. Some of you may have read the book Unbroken or seen the movie Unbroken. Louis Zamperini is who that movie and the book are all about. So, Mike, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us what a relation you were to him, and did you personally know him? Is he still living?
Those sorts of things,
Yeah.
Yes. So, Louis was my grandfather's cousin, and unfortunately he is not still living. I think he died in 2014, and
Okay.
he was like, I want to say 96, 97 years old at that point. So he lived a full life, made it almost to 100.
Wow.
So I think my family's from Pennsylvania. They were coal miners. So the Zamperini side of my family were coal miners in the western part of Pennsylvania. Louis' family lived in New York for a while, but when Louis was small, I think it's in the book, when he was maybe 3 or something, they moved to California. So he had lived in California pretty much his whole life. And I had never met him. We had, as a family, we kind of knew of him because before Laura Hildenbrand's book came out, Unbroken, some of the family knew about him, and he had published his own book. And so one of my aunts had reached out to him at some point, over that time frame, and kind of established some correspondence with him, and so we kind of knew of him from that standpoint. My dad actually had heard a good bit about him when he was a kid. But in 2011, I was stationed on the West Coast in the Coast Guard. We were actually up in Oregon. I worked in Portland, Oregon. We lived right across the river in Washington State. And one summer we planned a road trip to California. It was 2011. Okay. And I wrote Louis a letter. I had his address, wrote him a letter. I think I got it from my aunt, put my phone number in it, said, hey, we'll be coming to California, and he lived in the Los Angeles area. Would love to visit if you're up for it and things. And he called as soon as he got the letter.
Wow.
I think he was 94 at that point. And so, yeah, he called and we arranged a visit. And, yeah, it was really neat. He lived by himself in the house that he had been in for 50, 60 years or something like that. And he actually, we're kind of driving through the hills, somewhere around Los Angeles trying to find his house. And he came out on the street and was waving at us, to get us to come in. And so it was really neat. He, at that point in his life, he was very healthy. He still lived by himself, drove a car. But we spent about an hour talking with him and, just hearing his stories and talking about things. So, that was a real blessing and neat thing to do. I have a neat picture of him and my kids on my phone. I could show you that later.
That'd
Maybe
be
you
great.
could splice it into the video.
We would love to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like the movie pretty much is accurate as far as his experience?
I think so. As far as I understood from talking to him and reading the books, yeah, I think so. So basically, there's two movies. The first movie covers his youth and his war experiences. The second movie really gets into when he came home. He struggled with alcohol. He struggled with what we now call PTSD, or
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress disorder, that back then they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Shell shock, maybe they called it.
Yeah.
And he was really struggling. Him and his wife were, I think, on the verge of breaking up. The second movie does cover him or his wife convincing him to go to a Billy Graham revival in California, getting saved. And what he says in the book, and I think the movie agrees, is he was kind of completely healed of his alcohol, his chronic nightmares that he would have
Really?
from
Wow.
prison camp and things like that. So I think the movies do a pretty good job.
And you said the second movie is Unbroken: Path to Redemption?
Yes.
I want
yes.
to watch that. That sounds great.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about his experience. It was a tough experience. Tell us about that.
So Louis grew up in California. He was a really good runner. He set all kinds of high school records for the mile in California, and then he ran at the University of South California, USC. Did really well there, but then when World War II broke out, he joined. It was the Army Air Force he was in.
Did
the
he
Air
join,
Force,
or did he get? You don't know?
I think he joined.
Okay.
I think so, because I think he was a little older than a lot of the new recruits. I think he was in his early 20s at that point. And so it was the Army Air Force. The Air Force didn't exist at that point. It was part of the Army. And he was I think he was, what was his job? He was on the plane. I don't remember if he was a pilot. I think he may have been. He wasn't a gunner or a crewman or different things like that. I think he was a pilot. And I think they were in, it may have been Hawaii or one of the islands in the Pacific. They actually went out on a search and rescue mission.
Really?
Another plane had gone down.
Oh, wow.
And so they went out to look for that plane. And I think at this point in the war, spare parts were short and things like that, so the planes were not as well maintained as they should have been. And his plane crashed. They had some sort of mechanical problem and it crashed. There were 11, pretty sure about these numbers, but I think there were 11 crewmen. Only 3 survived. Even that part of it, is told in the book. Louis attributes that to a miracle. He basically was tangled up in wiring or different things, and he was getting pulled down when the plane was sinking, and he kind of blacked out.
Wow.
But somehow he got up to the surface, and it was him and 2 other guys, 3 total, that survived, got in a life raft.
Where did the plane go down? Was it?
It was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, and they drifted, I think, westward, like over 1,000 miles, till they eventually hit the Marshall Islands, I think it was.
Okay.
Which at that point were held by the Japanese, and that was I want to say 47 days. I don't remember all the exact numbers, but I think it was 47 days.
Wow.
They were on the raft. Only 2 survived. One of the guys died.
Wow.
So that was, at one point they went, I think, around a week without rain, and so they thought they were going to die of dehydration at that point. And
They had no food, right?
right, no food. So they actually caught birds. So like some birds would land in the raft, and they ate some of those. And then they figured out a way to try to catch smaller sharks. They had no fishing equipment, but there would be sharks circling the raft, and one of them would like put their hand in the water, and they would try to grab a smaller shark and and get it get it on the raft.
Wow.
I think he talks about they eventually realized like how big of a shark they could do that with, and how big was too big, and
Wow.
things like that. But somehow they survived. They were basically skeletons by the time they drifted up. After I want to say 47 days to the Marshall Islands, held by the Japanese. And so they were immediately taken prisoner when they drifted up on those islands. And then, the book and the movies cover it, a really horrific experience in the prison camps, the Japanese prison camps. There was one prison guard in particular who was very sadistic, very just invented ways to be cruel and punish people, and Louis and him didn't have a good relationship, and so I think Louis kind of stood out, and so that guard would pick on him, and I think I want to say at one point Louis got transferred to a different prison camp, and so there was a reprieve from this. His nickname was the Bird, this one prison guard, and if he had a reprieve for a little while, and then after a few weeks or something, that prison guard also got transferred to the same camp that he was at. So the really cruel treatments started to resumed again. So I think that was a lot of the source of the nightmares that Louis would have, was specifically due to this one prison guard.
Yeah.
And once he got back, he would have nightmares, PTSD. We talked about that, post-traumatic stress disorder, and really a hard time. I think there were times when he was having nightmares, he would wake up and he was like choking his wife, at night in their sleep, and so it was obvious that he needed help. He turned to alcohol, and was really struggling with alcohol. But this was the time when Billy Graham was heavily involved in evangelism in California, and he was holding a tent revival in the town where Louis lived at, and his wife, convinced him to go, and he was saved, and his problems. Basically, he gives his witness that his nightmares and his alcohol, everything just overnight went away.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And then he, gave his life to serving the Lord after that. He opened like a boys' camp, a camp for troubled, city youth and things like that to get out in the wilderness and find out about the Lord, and and did a lot of neat ministry things. Later on in his life.
Do you know about how old he was when he became a Christian?
I don't. I would say maybe late 20s, early 30s, guessing.
Okay.
Maybe
so most
maybe
of his
early
life
30s.
he spent as a Christian.
Yes. Yeah, it was. I think it was. Yeah, it was several years after he got back from the war, because he was married. I think they had one or two young children, so somewhere in that ballpark. Late 20s, early 30s.
Wow. That's, like I say, when I read the book, it's like, didn't he almost escape and then he got caught again? It's like things went from bad to worse, and then you say when he moved away, then the prison guard moved, and it's like, things just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yes. You had mentioned that, the book was hard to read from that perspective. So it is also exceptionally well written. I found myself when I was reading it, up at 2 a.m, just
Yeah.
couldn't put it down, keep
Yeah.
turning the pages. The lady that wrote it, Laura Hillenbrand is her name. She also wrote the book about Seabiscuit the racehorse,
Oh,
and
okay.
she's a tremendous author. She has some sort of a health issue where she suffers from vertigo and things like that. She can't leave her house very often.
Wow.
So Louis and her never met in person. They talked on the phone a good bit. Louis sent her boxes of memorabilia that she could go through and research and things like that. But Louis told me when I did have that chance to visit with him, that when he read his book, his own autobiography or memoirs that he had written maybe 15 years before Laura Hillenbrand's book came out, he said that if he read his own book, it reminded him of being in prison camp. If he read Laura Hillenbrand's book, he had to put the book down and look out the window to convince himself that he wasn't actually back in prison camp.
Wow.
Like her writing was that powerful.
Wow.
And so she did a tremendous job with it. And but yeah, so just going to that part of it, that's kind of neat, that they had that relationship, and she did that. It's such a good job with the book.
It really is. So most of his life was spent as a Christian then.
Yes. Yep. So he lived till, I want to say 96, 97, and somewhere around age 30, say, that he was saved. So yeah, 60 some years.
Wow. Did he do a lot of speaking about the experience?
He did. I think he did. He had an agent. I remember talking to him about that. And even at that point, when he was 94, he would do speaking engagements. And he had an agent who scheduled things and booked trips and whatnot. I know he did a lot, and he preached a message of forgiveness. That he actually went back to Japan and offered forgiveness to the people of Japan and the prison guards
really? Did
that
he
they
meet
could
up with
find.
them?
I don't think they ever found the bird.
Okay.
But maybe found some prison guards who he had been imprisoned under, and he preached to them and offered forgiveness and things like that. So I think that was a big part of his ministry, the power of forgiveness. He did start in addition to doing a lot of speaking and telling his story and witnessing to Jesus' saving power through his own witness. He started a boys' camp that he ran for inner city youth to get out in the wilderness and learn about Jesus and things like that. So yeah, he did a lot of neat things, in ministry through his life. So.
I love that. It reminds me of the story of Jake DeShazer. We had written about him. He was one of the Doolittle Raiders.
Okay.
His plane went down, and he was captured and tortured by the Japanese. But then after World War II, he came back and went to Bible college and went back and preached to the people that had tortured him, like the prison guards. And just the power of forgiveness. We used him as an example of forgiveness. And it sounds like Louis the same thing, you know? So thousands of people were saved because he forgave the people. And then when he was old, he got Alzheimer's, and he remembered that he was a missionary to Japan, but he didn't remember being in prison.
Wow.
Which is kind of...
Wow.
Yeah, that shows forgiveness really took, you know?
Yeah, the power, and even mentally. That's interesting. Yeah, so the other thing that I just remembered that Louis autographed a copy of the book when I visited with him and gave it to me, and I think he wrote "Be hardy," hardy in terms of like resilient toughness and things like that. So I think that was, the other thing that he tried to, to impress on people, obviously through his experience and everything that he endured.
Yeah.
And not through our own power, I don't think he was saying, I think through Jesus's,
Right.
Strength that, that we can overcome more than we think we can overcome,
That's just amazing. I think kids need heroes like this, examples who illustrate forgiveness, in our lives. If you're teaching little kids and they're angry at their brother for messing up their Legos or something, and then they hear the story of somebody like Louis, that just really puts shoe leather on what forgiveness is all about.
That's true.
And that's what life is about. It's about repentance and forgiveness. And I just think he's an excellent example of that. And you have a great godly heritage.
Yeah, that is neat. So he is not, it's not a direct family heritage. So basically, his grandfather was my great-great-grandfather maybe or something.
Yeah.
But it is certainly in the family tree. So.
Well, that's amazing.
That is neat. Yeah, I guess for my my heritage, my dad's family, who was on Louis' side, they were Catholic, and a lot of them really didn't understand, I don't think, true salvation in terms of a relationship with Jesus Christ. So I think that actually came through my mother's side, into my life,
Wow.
But that is neat, though.
It is. Kids need to hear these stories, and it's so important for them to be preserved because it seems like we're losing our history. The schools are not really teaching much about history anymore, and kids learn history better through the lives of real people that experienced history. It's just a much more powerful way of learning.
It sure is. Yeah, when I was a kid, I really didn't enjoy history because
I didn't either.
the way that it used to be taught was just names and dates that you had to memorize, and it was hard as a young child to make any sense of that or wonder how it meant to me or how it mattered to me. But as I got older, I read a few books that were really well done, history books that wasn't just names and dates and facts, but telling the stories of the people that were involved.
Yes.
And so that, eventually I started to really like history a lot more through reading some of those books. And then I really started to like history in that it explains the world around us, that the way we live, the way our culture is, all that somehow, came to be through events in history, and the more you understand the history, the more our world makes sense. And then I think Winston Churchill was a big historian,
He was
the leader of England in World War II. And it was his understanding of history that allowed him to understand the threat that Hitler in Germany posed to the rest of the world before many other people did, because he knew a lot of history. And I think it's a Churchill quote that the further you look back, the further you can look forward. So basically, the more you understand about history, the more you can maybe envision how the future will unfold based on patterns that have happened in the past in history. So.
Absolutely, and watching God's plan for history, how God worked out his plan through the lives of real people, that's just fascinating to me. It's kind of watching God's providential hand through all these events where, Louis, I'm sure, was ready to despair with everything he went through, but then God preserved his life to have him become a Christian and influence so many other people, and that's what it's all about.
That's true. Yeah, amen to that. And you had mentioned spiritual heritage before too, and just all that history. Like, when did somebody in somebody's family chain get saved? And how did that influence the rest of the family?
Yeah.
all that sort of thing. So, no,
Yeah.
that's really neat.
It is. Heaven's going to be great because you're going to hear how people's decisions that they made influenced us and how decisions we made influenced others. And, you know, God's got that master plan
Yeah,
for
amen.
eternity.
Amen.
So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I
It
know
was a
people will
pleasure to be here.
blessed.
Amen.
You know, Louis' story reminds me so much of Jake DeShazer, as I said when I was interviewing him. And we've got the story of Jake DeShazer in our book, Portraits of Integrity. We've also got an audio on the Uncle Rick Audio Book Club, a whole audiobook about Jake DeShazer. And I'm sure you will enjoy that too if you enjoyed the story about Louis Zamperini. So make sure you check out our website, sign up to get emailings. We'd love to send freebies. We just put out a new Uncle Rick audio freebie. Every first Friday of the month we send a freebie audio. So sign up so you can take advantage of that. Thanks for joining us today. See you next week.